Please welcome our host for today's Retail Summit, NAMM President and CEO, Mr. Joe Lamond.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Don. Great playing. Don Alder, everybody. I want to bring out someone today who is going to, I think, epitomize everything I've just talked about. The idea of improving one's own business, looking at what one can do in their own life for their own business, their family, and provide that kind of leadership. And not only has he served the industry on the NAMM board, the NAMM executive committee, and been an exemplary member of the industry with his own store and shared a lot of his ideas, but now he's written a book. Not a whole lot of people in our industry have written books about tips for being a better retailer and to share those ideas. And he's here with us today, and I'm going to get a little bit behind some of those stories. And my hope is everyone will read this book and share it with their staff, and it'll improve your business and probably change your trajectory in your future. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chip Averwater from Averwater Music.
How you doing, my friend?
Sorry about that, Chip.
Yeah.
A long intro.
Thanks.
Have a seat.
Thanks. Welcome back to Tennessee.
No, I said have a seat, but yeah, welcome back to Tennessee. You're on the other side.
Yeah.
Since you're kind of casual, I think I'm gonna. Yeah. So, tell me a little about your business. I mean, tell me about Averwater Music. What's the multi-generation, right?
That is. My grandfather got on a train in Cincinnati.
So, which one is this guy?
He is on this side, on the left.
Okay.
Got on a train in Cincinnati with one of his friends, and he stepped off in Memphis, and he noticed there wasn't a piano teaching studio, and so he opened one. That was 1921. It's continued since then. They were very innovative advertisers. They opened the windows and played.
People walking by?
Yeah.
Did they sell then or just teach?
They sold lesson packages. I think it was 30 lessons for $7 or something.
This picture here?
That's my grandparents and my parents. That was actually a NAMM show, 1964 NAMM show. Yeah.
In early media, men of music.
That was opening a new store. They gave away band instruments and got some publicity for it.
Interesting. All right, so who are these folks?
Those are my grandparents at the 1940 NAMM show. Notice, Joe, they use the same badges today that they were using then. You know? We've come a long way. Sorry, buddy.
My turn. Wow.
Yeah, this was the store in about 1960, I think, and my grandfather was really proud of this because he had all those displays custom made, and he should have been proud. It cost him almost $3,000, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
The later version?
Yeah, that was in the late 60s. Notice the acrylic letters on the corrugated background. That was the latest rage at the time.
Tin?
No, I think they
tin roof, or is that plastic?
I don't know.
Memphis, I don't know.
It was probably tin in Memphis. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. 4 generations, huh?
Yeah, that's my grandfather and my father, and that guy with the dark hair is a much earlier version of me.
And CJ.
CJ is
CJ,
there.
sorry about this. CJ, where are you?
Yeah, he's over there. Yeah.
Nice picture there, bud.
See the similarity?
Uh-huh. But today, your brother's involved, right? I don't see your brother in the picture.
Yeah, my brother Pat is involved too. He's my partner in business.
Is he kind of getting a little, how does he feel about all this attention you're getting with the book and the XCOM?
He's smarter than I am.
He just stayed out
He stays out of all these things.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a photo. Oh, there he is, Pat.
Ah, that's
okay,
great.
Good.
Pat, I'm sorry. It was all Joe's idea. I had nothing to do with it.
I just want to make sure he wasn't left out.
And that's nice too, Joe.
I mean, the sibling rivalry of siblings can be really dangerous.
Yeah, right. I'm sure he's going to his truck right now to get his gun.
Well, anyway, that's Pat today. So that's the leadership team of Averwater Music today. So anyway.
Yeah, Pat and CJ run it now. I just muck things up for them.
You have actually pulled out a bit, haven't you, as far as the day-to-day?
Sort of. They've got it under control, so I work 15, 20 hours a week.
Well, that's
try not to get in the way.
We talk about the book. That obviously took a lot of time. So here's the store today. That's a beautiful store.
Thanks. Yeah, that's the building that houses the current mess. And that on the right is me and my Sunday finest.
Very nice. I've been to that. So how many of you have been to Amro Music? Have you been able to see it? I mean, if you go to Memphis or go to Graceland, you got to stop and see it. It's just
Are there some people out there?
Retail store.
I can't see. Are there really people
sorry. This
out
is just right here, babe.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But you still play. I think that's a good shot. I pulled that off your website.
Why did you put that up there? They don't even turn my mic on.
No, because I thought the idea of it contrasts you and the tie. Because, I mean, the thought that you are still playing and a guitar player, I thought is relatable.
Yeah, I can still remember some chords.
Yeah, that's okay. So then I just want to say about the NAMM thing. I mean, you devoted 8 years of your life to be on the NAMM executive committee. And I will tell you that for me, you came on right when I came on. And it was the highlight for 8 years to be able to work with you and to get inside the processes. And I know that you have had a huge impact on NAMM. And a lot of it is stolen from your strategy with your store. I mean, I just wanted to bring this up, that the guys who do volunteer put a lot of time in, and it's free time. They don't get any reimbursement for it, and it really helps shape the industry. So anyway, it was really cool.
Thanks.
So down to the book. So what made you decide to write this?
Well, it was a dumb idea, really. I had no idea how long it would take.
Did you think it was going to be a book, or was it more just training?
No, I started off just kind of collecting ideas. So when I would hear somebody say something that made sense and seemed worth saving, I wrote it down. So some of them I got from my friends here, and a couple of them I got from you, Joe, and most of them I paid full price for. I figure I'm due a doctorate from the School of Hard Knocks.
This is 3 generations, though, right? I mean, your grandfather, your father, don't do this, do that.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the idea of, so when you decided to make this into a book, I mean, obviously that would be a commitment. What do you do at the time? How do you find the time to do that? How do you carve that out from your schedule?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe the bigger question is, how do I stay out of trouble after I've finished? My employees want me to write another one.
Just keep you out of the store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, there's a quote in there that I thought was pretty interesting. And then for those of you who haven't seen Chip's store, the quote is something like, "The owner's vision is adopted by the staff. His priorities become the goals. His habits become the standards. And his style become the culture." You guys all have your stores. Is that true? Would you believe that's true? And how do you arrive at that conclusion? From visiting stores or?
Did I really say that? Wow.
Yeah, because I think your store is absolutely beautiful. When I was in there, it had your style all the way around.
Thanks. Well, you know, it may sound funny, but I think a store really is a work of art. If you think about it, it emanates from the founder's vision, and it is created according to his abilities and his talents, and it's made inevitably unique by our own personalities. So I really do believe that a store is a work of art. And one of the truths is, if you want to know a retailer, walk through his store.
You get to see their personality on display.
You do. You can't hide it. You know?
So is there anyone you think right now in this room going, uh-oh?
Besides me?
All right. Well, here's how we're going to try and do this. We're going to watch the time and make sure everyone can get down to the floor and get to their day. But I'm going to try and break this down into a couple segments. You know, this isn't trying to be a substitute for reading the book. And again, if we can just take 1 or 2 ideas out of this, write them down, and think about them carefully. That would mean I'd check the box as a success this morning. We're going to try and cover a lot, but it's not a substitute for getting the book and reading the book. I mean, I think most smart retailers are going to do that, and I just can't see why you wouldn't use every tool available. And so we're going to take this in some segments. So the first one is, what makes a great store? I think, look, these times are very difficult. As, in the UK, remember when we went over to one of the UK shows, we actually played bingo on how many ways you could say "in these challenging times," because people were writing remarks, these times that are challenging, in these tough economic times. There's so many different ways to say it, but we've been saying it for years now, and some people maybe have been saying it for decades. It's tough. It's tough out there.
Did I say that? It's tough.
It's tough.
Let me say that.
I mean, there's, and it's probably not going to get any easier quickly. But what I'm struck by is that if you go through NAMM's history, and there's 111 years now of these books at the NAMM Resource Library, there have always been successful retailers, always, through it all.
Yeah.
As tough as it got, World War II, Great Depression. And so some have always been able to thrive. And what an industry needs is successful dealers.
Yeah.
I think what a community needs is successful dealers, what owners and staff. I mean, you need profit. You need to be able to be a successful, profitable business. Jack Welch was on an interview lately and saying, you know, as he does his fundraising and going around to different corporations, he said, corporations that aren't profitable are no fun to go to. They don't help, they don't donate, they don't help charities. They're just nasty moods. You know, it's much better to be around a successful company. And how do you feel about that?
Well, absolutely. And I tell you, it's a lot more fun to work for a profitable company, too. Yeah. You know, profit makes the world go round, and it really concerns me. It's kind of scary to see that some people think that profit is immoral. Yeah. You know, without profit, we're in deep trouble, and we just have to have profit to do all the things that we do in business. We have to have profit to pay salaries and to pay benefits and to make improvements and to try new things. So without profits, we're not here.
It's not a dirty word?
It's not a dirty word. It's really created for us. People who malign profit don't understand it. It's created for us the highest standard of living that the world has ever known. Yeah. So it's not making profit that's a problem. It's when we don't make a profit.
There's a quote that I'll pull out. I think it's a good one. It's not whether you can do it, it's whether you can do it best.
Yeah.
The winner takes all. Second place gets nothing, no matter how great the effort or how close the race. What made you write that?
Experience it every day, maybe. You know, it's retail is competitive, and the shopper has an obligation and takes it seriously to get the best value for their money. They compare a lot of things, but in the end, they're gonna choose to spend their money where they feel they get the best value. And if you're not that place, you don't get the sale. And the company, you know, one company gets all the sales, and the rest doesn't get them. So it's not a consolation to be second best. It's a catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. So you also say differentiation is almost always a better strategy.
Yeah, right. There are too many of us that do the same thing. I mean, we have the same products, similar. Sometimes they're identical. We have similar pricing. Store policies and hours and things don't vary a lot. So that turns everything into a price war, and we're not going to win a price war. There's always someone who underestimates their costs. So we've got to find some way to make ourselves different. Find some way to add value so customers are willing to buy from us at a price where we actually can make a living.
Yeah. How did you have to figure that out? You had competitors in your market. You just had to keep refining that concept?
You do. I think that's kind of the definition of retailing. Every day is refining what you do and making it a little better. Mm-hmm. Finding some way to meet what the customer wants a little bit better than everybody else does. And the guy who hustles and stays with it the longest and has the most determination is the one who gets the business.
Yeah. Forget about a level playing field. Find your own field. Great quote.
Yeah, that's true. You know, every time we retailers get together, and we'll do that these next few days, we complain to each other about all the inequities, sales tax inequality, and internet, and vendors who sell to big retailers at lower prices, and we reason that if the playing field were level, then we could compete. We'd have a good chance in there. But what we really need, if everything was equal, we're in a price war, and that we're not going to win that. So what we really need is to be different. We don't need a level playing field. We need our own playing field.
Yeah. One concept that is probably a little controversial in the book, but again, the School of Hard Knocks, one store versus multiple store. You say that the most profitable store is the first, the least profitable is the second.
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably a sensitive subject for some of us, but I think it's an expensive lesson to learn. I know that. It just makes sense when you have a retail concept, a store that's making money and is successful, that you could duplicate it in another location. And it seems like it would not only make as much money, but it might make more money because you've got economies of scale and you've got increased purchasing power. But it almost never works out that way. As a matter of fact, a lot of times second stores are not even profitable.
How do you find that out?
Expensive experience.
How many stores did you have?
We had 4. In the 1970s, we had 4 stores. Yeah.
Was that a tough decision to retrench?
Yeah, it is a tough decision. You kind of have to suck up your pride sometimes, because particularly if you use the opportunity to run a going out of business sale at one of those little stores, you're really sucking up your pride. But the more you study those numbers and the more you realize what your opportunities are if you do it, then it makes that decision a whole lot easier.
Yeah. So I think some takeaways from this section. There's always been successful stores through it all. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that we've got to concentrate on. They're usually different, they're changing, they're pioneers, but there's always been successful store. Differentiation is the key to that. And forget about a level playing field. Find your own field. The idea of everything was fair, again, we pine away for this concept that Darwin pretty much figured out nothing's ever going to be fair. It's just not possible. Yet we spend a lot of time wishing it were. I hear a lot from a lot of dealers who it's just not fair, and I just don't know what to say to that. It's never been fair, never will be.
Fair. Yeah.
So now into the details, because I think what you're talking about, finding what the impact of multiple stores is, leads right into this segment of retail is detail, and that's something that's probably missing in a lot of our stores. Our music store owners are passionate musicians, collectors, music educators, they're players, but not all of them are accountants or think that way. That's a really different skill set. And we look at these retail census figures across all, not just music, but that the average profit on sales when it's all said and done, but before paying the tax, man, it's from 1% to 3%.
Yeah, it's scary.
So we come to these shows. All of you guys are going to be down there buying inventory or laying in inventory for fall and Christmas. So say you buy $500,000 worth of inventory, you're talking maybe $15,000, $20,000 of swing between being in the black and being in the red. That's pretty unforgiving, And so the detail is really important, and that could be the difference between being profitable or not. So, you talk about a section in the book called "Retail is Detail." Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it is. We talked about how things are so similar between stores with the same products and the same pricing, basically, and so the only differences really are the retail, are the details, and we have to get them right. That's what the customer is choosing by. It's the only thing they have, the only criteria they've got to choose by. So it's up to us to get those details right, and there are thousands of them.
So you put this quote in: study and put systems in place that tell you exactly where you're making money and where you are not.
Yeah,
that's brutal.
It's what?
It's brutal, because you were surprised by what you found.
Yeah, it's true. It is brutal, but it's probably the most important information that we can get. We just believe, we have a tendency to believe that everything that we do makes a profit, and most things do make a gross profit. We see to that, but cost of merchandise is not the only expense we have in a business. We have all the other expenses that come into play, the salaries and all the occupancy expenses and insurance and the cost of investment and all of those things. When we figure those in, a lot of the things we do don't make a profit. And that's pretty critical information, because if we don't understand that, we're spending a lot of our times, maybe years of our working lives, doing things that aren't taking us forward. They're taking us backwards. Every time we do one of them, we lose money. We take money out of our back pocket. So it's critical to know which things we do are making the profit and which things are making losses.
Okay, so how did you implement that at Amro?
Yeah. With spreadsheets. That's the only way, and it's tedious, but it's not really difficult. So you take the income statement for your company and you put it in one column, and then in the columns to the right, you put the departments or the locations or whatever you want to analyze by. And then you spread the numbers from your income statement across those columns. And when you finish, you've actually got a financial statement for each of the departments or each of the locations or whatever you're analyzing. And it's pretty easy until you get to the bottom line, and the bottom line is always a shock. I've never seen yet one of those exercises where the owner of the store didn't say, whoa, you've made a mistake. That can't be right. I'm selling a lot of that product. I'm making a gross margin on every one of them. How can I be losing money on it?
Did that happen to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was one of the most traumatic things that we ever did, and it was probably the most valuable thing. It was the biggest turning point in our business, for sure.
Okay, so let's spend a minute on that. I mean, again, I hear spreadsheets and I kind of glaze over, and I'm sure Dom's asleep already. But I mean, you know, a lot of us are. It's easier to jump on the floor and help a customer, and you know, go back in the warehouse or meet with a rep and do some purchasing. Spreadsheets. Okay, so what happened with Amro? You don't have to get into the category specifically that it happened to, but tell me about the process.
Well, we did the exercise, and and all the numbers looked perfect going across. I couldn't find anything that I disagreed with.
These were putting the expenses out, right? All the true expenses.
Income and expenses, so that you total them at the bottom and you get a net profit for the department. And when I got to the bottom, I looked at the numbers and I said, there's no way. You know, your employees are right. You are nuts. And I totally rejected it for a couple of years. I kept going back to the numbers and saying, let's see if you can find the error, and I couldn't even bend the numbers to get the results that I wanted. So finally, I was totally intrigued. So I separated a couple of departments completely. I made them individual companies with their own checking accounts and their own payroll accounts, and it proved exactly what the numbers said. That was a huge turning point for us.
So you found that one whole segment of your business wasn't making any money for you.
I found that several whole segments of our business weren't making money. I found that a couple of segments of our business were making more than 100% of the profit, and the other segments were losing the money. And it doesn't have to be any particular segment. It could be any segment. It's usually whatever segment we're the best at. That one makes money, and whatever we're second place or third place in the market, we usually lose money at that.
Yeah. So why do so many people miss that and not do it?
Spreadsheets are boring.
Yeah, we mentioned that.
Yeah, they're a drag. It takes a lot of time. And that's not really our inclination. We're retailers, and we like to get out there on the floor and make things happen. We know when we've got to make sales to make a profit, and so that's our inclination. You know, sometimes we think that thinking is doing nothing, but thinking is doing the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the line, your quote, gut feel is an illusion. Numbers are real. And even with the analytical mind that went into that process that you have, you still didn't trust your own outcomes.
No, well, I just couldn't imagine. I mean, we'd been operating for 60, 70 years just on the assumption that everything we did was contributing something here, but it wasn't the truth.
I think that would be a real shocking experience for a lot of the people here.
I'm almost sure it would.
How many of you guys have done that? Wow. How many are going to do it now? Come on. All right, Gordy, you got one. I just think that it's, you know, I got my kids are always watching these movies, and one was called Night at the Museum. And there's this great scene in Night at the Museum 2 with General Custer, of all people.
Right.
And they're being chased by someone through the Smithsonian, and the person goes, "What's your plan?" And Custer goes, "We're Americans. We don't plan. We do."
That's probably true, isn't it?
And I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah.
You know, we don't plan. We do. We're too busy doing to plan.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes ready, fire, aim.
I don't think it worked for Custer.
No, it didn't work out too well.
That was but that was anyway. You say that a system unwritten is a system adrift.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, a system is anything we do in our business regularly. It could be like balancing the cash, or taking a special order, or taking inventory, or processing invoices, or whatever. We come up with a system to do those things. But systems are always under attack. We forget steps along the way, and our employees don't understand the need for a step, and so they leave it out. And after some big mistake comes to light, then we remember that we once had a system that was designed to avoid that. And so we try to pull ourselves back on track.
Yeah.
And so I think that unless we write these things down, we agree to them and we write them down, we're always going to be subject to that drifting. And I don't think writing them down has to be a big deal. I mean, it doesn't have to be formal. You just write them and kind of assemble a little manual. Everybody gets together and agrees on them, and you agree that we're going to use this system unless we all get together and agree that we're going to change this system. Yeah. Then you can use that as training and as references, or try to hold us a little better on track.
And then they're living documents, though, right? I mean,
they are. Yeah, well, they're changing all the time.
You don't want to get stuck in the past and say that's the way we've always done it. You clearly can update them when you feel like it.
Exactly. It's moving all the time, right?
Yeah. I recently had an experience to meet with of all things, a Marine drill instructor. And over his desk, he had the sign that said, "Don't confuse effort with results." Is that something that kind of ties into all this? I mean, I think everyone here would say they're busy all day long, right? I mean, are you guys pretty much dead dog tired by the time you go home? A lot of effort goes into running a music store, but a lot of us aren't happy with the results we're getting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that ties in with the idea of figuring out which things we do make a profit too. I mean, we can spin our wheels a lot on things that take money out of our back pocket. So I do agree with that.
All right, some takeaways from Retail is Detail. Focus on what you do best. Put systems in place that show you where you are making money and where you are not. Gut feel is an illusion. Numbers are real. And don't confuse effort with results.
Yeah.
Couple good takeaways there?
Amen.
Okay. Next segment, staffing. Okay, this is aimed at the owners in the room today and also the managers, though. Sure. I think it's all of us who are involved in the running of the business. It's a big expense, next to cost of goods, probably the biggest expense, yet also the biggest mystery. And I think it is a big advantage. You know, when we look at the competitive field out there, having a staff that really exemplifies your vision is one of the most important things you can do. You say, our people are our companies, and their qualities make all the difference. Sometimes we underestimate this. You go on, a good person doesn't create 20 to 30% more. It's 200 to 300% more. The old cliche is our people are our most important asset is inspiring and politically wise, but it should really be our good people are our most important assets.
Yeah.
That's tight.
Sorry.
How do you find out about that? I mean, what led you to that conclusion?
Oh boy, some expensive experience with some not so good people, and then some experience with some great people. I mean, they can make huge difference. You know, sometimes I make little asterisks on our financial statement. I'll put John Jones was here this year or something to explain the results for it, because they actually can turn the results of a department around completely. And it's not just salespeople, it can be all our support people too. They make as much difference, they can be that much more productive. It's just that we can measure salespeople easier.
I mean, a lot of people don't aspire to retail.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I haven't heard a lot of people coming out of college saying that's for me. Yet all of us at some point decided to be in this world.
Yeah.
Why? Why do they view it as only as an entry-level position?
Yeah, that really is unfortunate. And I don't think it has to be that way. I've never met a kid who said he wanted to grow up and be a retailer, and I've never met a student who said he was studying to be a retailer. And that's too bad, because I think it's a great profession. It's rewarding, maybe not always financially, but psychologically, and it's an important role in society. So probably one of the reasons is that we have a reputation in retail for not being high paid. And there's also a reputation in retail for our people being untrained and unknowledgeable. So those aren't things to aspire to. I suspect that's the problem.
So, that session we had a couple years ago where Gene Simmons came out and basically lambasted the retailers and said basically something like, you hire old guys in ponytails who used to be roadies for Foghat.
Yeah. It's true.
So why is it the elephant in the room that we could do a better job hiring? And how do you do it? How do you hire?
Very, very carefully and thoroughly, but not slowly. First of all, we try to make it easy for employees to apply. People who are available for work have ready resumes, but the good applicants aren't the good candidates aren't in the applicant pool. So we've got to entice them to apply for our jobs. And so I don't require resumes, because people who already have jobs they don't have ready resumes. I encourage them to send us an email and tell us they might be interested, or call us and tell us, or fill out an interest form on our website. And from what we can tell from that information, then we encourage them to fill out an application. I believe in a pretty extensive application with a lot of open-ended questions, because a lot of times you can get a pretty good read on their personality or their communication skills or their goals and motivation. And from those applications, then we'll a lot of times invite them in for an initial interview, not with top level, but with somebody on the staff who uses an interview sheet, a list of questions that they go down. And people who do that well, then we'll run a background check and a credit check. Believe it or not, we think a credit check is really wonderful information, because if they don't handle their business well, they're not going to handle your business well. And then after that, we do run a personality test. I think that's pretty important for matching them to the right job.
Well, not many people know about that or do that. Personality test. That sounds kind of voodoo-ish, or
yeah, it kind of does.
Tarot cards.
It's kind of like reading your palm. Yeah, but it really works. I was totally surprised by personality.
Was that one of those things you rejected at first, but then?
Yeah. One of our buddies, actually, Dave Miller at Buddy Rogers Music in Cincinnati, turned us on to that, and it was one of those great ideas you get from your partners from events like this.
Mm-hmm. What did you find? It's curious. It's an interesting story about when the guy came in to try and sell you on the concept.
Yeah, he did. He came in to show us these personality tests, and he said, I don't have a sales pitch for you, but if you'll take these little forms out and have 3 of your people fill them out for you, I'll tell you about your people. And I said, great. And brought him back to him, and he looked at the first one, and he said, this person's pretty good with details, probably an accountant. And I said, wow, that's pretty good. That's impressive. And the next one, he said, and this person is probably your best salesperson. And I said, man, that's awesome. And the third one, he said, this guy's probably a technician. And I said, wrong. He's working in our repair shop. I mean, he's working as a salesperson. And he said, he's not a very good one. I said, holy smoke, that explains the problem. So ever since then, I've never hired a person without doing a personality test.
Are they complicated? Is it just the simple?
No, it takes 5 minutes. You just check some words off on a sheet, and it programs it in there's a computer program to score it, and it tells you what jobs they'd be good at. And how to relate to them. I like that part too.
You said something about the pool of applicants isn't a cross-section of the population. It's basically a cross-section of the unemployed.
It is, yeah. The pool of applicants is just full of undesirables and unemployables, and we don't always recognize that because we don't have experience with some of those problems. We don't know so much about drug addiction and alcohol problems and total financial irresponsibility and mood swings and all the things that plague people, and so we're not looking for them. We don't see the clues, but we have to remember that those people who are in the applicant pool, 90% of them, there's something not quite right.
Yeah. Okay, so here you've put a lot of steps in place to really take hiring seriously. I mean, I think that's, again, when I was in retail, I think, honestly, that was one of the things we didn't spend enough time on. We had an opening, the shift needed to be covered, we did what we had to do. It's almost like in combat, you give someone a promotion. But even doing everything you've done, you still say you've got a ratio of basically 1/3 of your hires were absolute mistakes.
Yeah.
1/3 of your hires were okay. And 1/3 were your stars that made the whole business.
That we wanted,
Those are not great odds, even doing everything you do.
It's true.
So how do you? What can you do to bump that to your favor? I mean, how do you?
Well, we're always looking for ways to improve it. And one way we found that helps that. When we choose an applicant, we hire them, we get all the managers to write down their predictions for this employee. And then we go back in 6 months or in a year when you're reassessing raises or something. And we compare what we've learned about them in that period that they're working for us to what we predicted for them. Yeah. And we see what we missed. A lot of times, there are almost always clues on those applications and those interviews that we miss. And when we go back, a lot of times we find that. We find ways to pick those up.
In hindsight. Okay, so if you get it right, you get those winners, those superstars.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have a slide on the math on this, but see if we can kind of walk through what a average salesperson does, a good salesperson, and one of the superstars, and what it can actually mean. Do you remember that off the top of your head? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I can get close anyway. And we were doing a study to see how much we could afford to pay people. We knew we had some people who were just really superstars and they were contributing profit to the company, and we knew they were valuable. We didn't know how valuable, and we didn't know what we could afford to pay to keep them, what made sense. And so we found out in our company the average salesperson sells about $400,000, and then a good salesperson sells about $800,000, and an outstanding salesperson sells about $1.2 million. Well, when we back out the cost of goods and the cost of employment, all the different things in employment, then we got what I call a net contribution margin for each of those people. And the average person has a net contribution margin of about $120,000. The good salesperson has an average contribution margin of about $255,000, and the outstanding salesperson has a contribution margin of $390,000. This is after employment expenses. So it was pretty easy to determine, yeah, we can afford to pay these guys more, and they're worth a whole lot more to us. I don't want to lose any of those guys. It kills me to lose them. But it also taught us that when we have somebody who's not meeting those numbers, we need to move them out quick. As soon as we see what we've got, we need to get them out of there.
Yeah. So your quote is, you can't hire enough good people.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we have a strange habit, I guess. Whenever we come across a good person, even if we don't have an opening, we hire them. Because I believe a good person, what defines a good person is that you just explain to them what your goals are, and they'll find a way to be productive. So I don't think there's if there's a limit to how many good people we can have on staff, I haven't found it. Yeah. I think there are lots more opportunities than there are good people.
Huh. The training, you do a lot of training?
Training, oh yeah.
How does that impact your success, do you believe?
Well, it's huge. I think that that the training isn't really an expense. It's an income item, because everybody that you train, just immediately the return on investment is almost immediate. So we do a tremendous amount of training. We have manuals for not only all the products, all the different kinds of products in the category in the company, but also on salesmanship and operating the computer and the telephone systems and handling complaints. And I think there are 20 different manuals. So, and we give those manuals to people not just when they start, but when we hire them. So if there's a week before they come to work, it's amazing what they can learn in that week. They're inspired, and they'll come to work with a real head start.
You talk in the book about how really what makes a great salesman is, we had a whole section on sales, but just because of time we couldn't fit it in, but confidence, the confidence of a salesman. And so whether they are really comfortable with a vendor's products or come to a show like this and get to really be trained on the product, that it just absolutely hits the bottom line immediately.
It really does, yeah. I don't think we've ever sent a salesperson to a manufacturer's training session that they didn't come back and within about 3 days sell enough product to pay our expenses on that trip. So salespeople sell what they know. They like to know the product. They like to be able to explain it to a customer. And if we can give them that information, hey, everybody wins on that.
Yeah. So back to we'll wrap on that one. But basically, training is probably the easiest competitive advantage, is what you say in the book.
Yeah.
Okay, some takeaways from the approach to hiring. You can never hire enough good people. Be careful what you reward, as that's what you'll get. And that's kind of the focus of what you pay and how you pay and what your standards are. If you measure it and reward it, that's what you'll get, whether you like it or not. Training doesn't cost, it pays. And an employee training and retailing is easily the best competitive advantage possible. Yeah. Okay. So that's a little bit about your philosophy on people. And I think having been to Chip's store, you can just see that emanating through your staff. It trickles down to every level. And it's a confidence and it's a calmness, I guess is a way to almost say it. Retail can be frenetic, but when everyone is well trained and understands their role and is confident in their role, there's just it emanates through the whole organization. And I think as a customer walks in, that's really palpable too, and probably builds a lot of confidence in them shopping there. So it kind of leads us to the last segment here, which is about leadership. I alluded to it in the opening, but I just think it's one of the biggest vacuums today in the world, all over, everywhere you look. I just think the world needs more leadership, people stepping up, having the courage to say, that's where we're going, how we're going to get there, how we'll know we'll get there. And so as it relates to our little industry, I mean, again, these are people who are going through some tough times. And whether it was a great idea or a bad idea, we all decided to get into the music business. Some point in our lives, some fork in the road, we said, a law school, or music business. And for many of us, it was the best decision in the world. You know, I mean, it is truly, I believe, the best business. And you just think how many friends we have in this room, the great music we're going to see here in Nashville. I mean, I don't think there's a better industry out there. But it's not always the easiest. And so we want to have this last topic on just the idea of leadership. Because if we're going to do it, we should be committed to it. And if we're committed to it, we should do it to the very best of our ability. So you have a great quote, and this is going to lead off this last section, but there is one characteristic all successful retailers have in common: powerful and unwavering determination to make their stores right. It's the essential ingredient, incalculably more important than the brains, education, contacts, and lucky circumstances that so often get the credit. Let me read that first part again. A powerful and unwavering determination to make their stores right. That's it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's the most important thing.
It's the owner's job.
It's the owner's job to bring what's called the vision, really, to have a goal in mind where we're going, and to be able to organize the store and push it through. It takes determination to push it through. You know, the thing about retail is not all that different. It's not rocket surgery. I mean, we know pretty much what we have to do. My customers tell me all the time how my store is supposed to operate. So it's not a big secret. We just have to push these details through and get them right. Yeah. And sometimes we talk about somebody who had a great idea. You know, they came up with a right idea at the right time. And okay, maybe that works sometimes, but there were probably a lot of people who had that same idea. The guy who won is the one who believed in it enough and was able to organize it and push it through. Yeah. So retail is very much the one who wins is the one who gets the most details right.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I talked about Steve Jobs in the opening. I'm sure a lot of people thought about a downloading service where you could purchase songs.
Yeah.
But only one.
He put it together.
Yeah. You know, you talk about an owner can delegate many things, but he can't delegate that.
Yeah, the one thing that the owner, and maybe the only thing that the owner has to do, or the person who's running the business, he has to know where we're going. He has to have a goal in mind. He has to be able to organize his company to do it. And then he has to have the determination to push that through. That's the one thing that you can't delegate to somebody else. All the other things you can delegate away. You can choose which things you like to do in the business and do the things that you're good at and choose somebody else to handle the other jobs. Yeah. But that vision and the goal and the determination to push it through, that's the owner's responsibility. If he doesn't have it, we're not getting there.
There's a line in the book about, you know, being an owner and having that responsibility is basically an unpaid job. Yeah. Right? The line is you don't get paid for being the owner. You get paid for whatever job you do, and you set that salary, but you only get paid as an owner if there's something left at the end of the year. Right. So not getting that right means you don't get paid.
Yeah, or maybe that you took money out of your pocket.
Or you're saying wages, you're working for wages.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So how did you come to that? I mean, the idea of it's because you're the owner, or what did Billy ever put it? SOB. Yeah. Or son of
bosses.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you come to that? That it's pretty, because I was an employee, but that was an interesting concept that you don't get paid to be the owner. That's it. You only get paid if there's profits at the end of the year.
And sometimes you don't get paid then too, because if you're trying to grow your company, you've got to keep it reinvested. That's true. There are no guarantees that we're going to make money. Just because you invest time and money in a company doesn't mean you're going to make a profit. So you got to get in there and hustle and push and be determined to get the results that you want.
So the idea you were saying that the working for wages versus profit. I mean, there's a lot of owners who could take the equity in their business and invest it. Yeah. I mean, maybe not now with the low rates, but and get a 4 or 5% return on a money market fund and not have all the hassle. Mm-hmm. But to exceed returns that you can get from just passive investing, you've got to get all this stuff right.
You do. You've got to have a goal in mind. You've got to find ways to be different, and you've got to push it through, get all the details right.
Yeah. The idea of survivability, 3 generations of Amro music. Oh, I forgot to ask, where did the name come from?
Well, that's a long-held company secret, Joe. But I bet I can trust you with it.
Thank you.
It was my grandfather, and his friend was named Frank Moorman, and so they considered the name Averwater and Moorman Piano Teaching Studios, but it might as well be Chinese. So they took letters from their name and formed Amro. And then Frank Moorman got homesick within a couple of months, went home to his mama, and my grandfather kept going, fortunately.
So it's a combination of Averwater and Moorman?
Averwater and Moorman, right. I don't know where they just made it up.
So anyway, so 3 generations. I mean, there's a lot of multi-generations. I mean, Cranleys, we just talked about, Schmidt, Menchie, Eckroth, Beacock, Munzingo, Tarpley. What's the secret to longevity, do you think? Or is there one?
Yeah, well, apparently there is a secret, because it doesn't work a lot of times. My mother likes to say it's shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. It's very few companies that actually do make it through. So, what is the secret? Yeah, I don't know. You've got to learn to work when you're young. You've got to understand that this is not an inheritance. That we've got to keep improving it every day and get those details right.
Yeah. So, but surviving that long, obviously there was some challenges. I mean,
yeah, lots of them.
How is your company? I mean, you got any great stories of the old days, how you got through some of those times, the leadership that got you through?
Well, when I think of the stories that my grandfather told me, I haven't had any hard times at all. He told me about accepting eggs and milk in pay for lessons during the Great Depression, because nobody had any money. So now when I think about the internet and sales tax inequalities and all the things that really aren't fair, I got a whole new perspective when I go back to taking eggs and milk for our business.
Yeah, does put it in perspective. The idea of what you do in the company, that's kind of one of the last maybe things we'll cover, that as owners or managers, sometimes you do get to choose what role you take.
Yeah, you do.
How have you defined that in your store with you and your team? Do what you do best. I mean, how have you evolved at doing what you do?
You mean how do we choose as a leader which things to do? Well, I think that a leader is responsible for the vision in the organization and pushing it through. But beyond that, they can do things. For example, some leaders, some CEOs of companies like to be out front and be the public speaker in the face of the company. And some people hate that. I don't really like that, believe it or not. But some people like to do the details, while other people like to work in broad strokes and have somebody else work out the details. So those are things that we can assign out. There's a great story. My favorite heroes from history are Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. And they probably did more to shape the modern world than anyone else that I can think of anyway. But what people don't know, if you read their history, Benjamin Franklin was not a public speaker. He almost never gave speeches. And when he did, they were memorable only for his poor delivery. Usually he would write out what he wanted to say and give it to someone else to read. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and then he sat there in mute while the Continental Congress mangled it. When he gave his inaugural address, it couldn't be heard past the second 2 rows. So here you have people that I consider the greatest leaders of the modern world, and they did it with the skills that they had, and it was not public speaking. You would think that would be a necessity, but it wasn't. They pushed it through with a printer's ink or a fountain pen or whatever tools that they were good with.
I think that's the toughest part. You get to decide what you want to do, but you can't leave the other things to chance. So that's probably, I think you can take that home as one of the most important lessons too. You get to choose what you want to do during your day. And it should be fun. If you own a company, you should be able to do what you like. I mean,
do what you're good at.
Otherwise, you might as well do something else. But you've got to not abdicate the responsibility of setting the goals, setting the direction, setting the vision, and then having everybody understand the milestones along the way and how you'll know when you get there. That's an important lesson for all the guys who are in the stores. Again, a lot of us love to do certain things, be on the floor, do the buying, do the advertising, do the internet stuff. But it's tough to. No one's good at everything, right?
No,
it's tough to be good at all those things. You delegate the rest. So I think some takeaways from this one is an owner can delegate many things, but he cannot delegate vision and determination. Good fortune in retail is never luck, or as they say, hope is not a plan, but determined execution of a reasonable plan. Good strategy starts with a clear understanding of what produces a profit, back to the details, and do more of what's profitable and less than what's not. It's not that, it sounds so simple.
Yeah, it sounds simple.
All right, so everybody, please, if you're a good, smart, entrepreneurial retailer, Chip would recommend that you go get this book. He's waived his very expensive fee today in the hopes of seeing a big bump on the sales chart of the books. So just thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I love this organization and this industry, and it's a great pleasure to work with guys like you.
Yeah. Hope we made a couple of points you've taken home and taken back to the store. Share them. Get the book. Share it with your staff. Have a great show, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chip.
Well done. Thanks for all of you.